And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another YouTube reading guide series. Today is video 12 in my 14 video series walking through the correct reading order of the character Superman by DC. To create this guide I have read 1,677 single issues comprising every single Superman issue released from Man of Steel issue 1 back in 1991 up until the event Flashpoint in 2011. That included spin-offs, tie-ins, mini-events, maxi-series, everything. And I've used that knowledge to build the internet's most detailed reading guide for the world's most famous superhero. I'm doing that via a series of videos that hopefully you've been watching, which is talking through a Google Sheets that I've split into 14 tabs, representing the 14 discrete eras that I've split this period of Superman reading into. Now, this can be viewed and downloaded for free on my website, and generally each era or tab is separated by a major DC event that I'm also releasing separate videos on. So the last one just before this video was actually Infinite Crisis, what I call a mega event. Now, this playlist is going to contain every single Superman video and every DC event video in chronological order, so you can just go through the whole thing in one go. The Superman videos aren't going to exist in isolation because that simply doesn't make any sense. However, if you're only interested in one-off DC events, they're also being collected in a dedicated 11 video playlist available separately on my channel. I will stress it's really important that you watch the intro video to this series. It explains a lot of key terms like Type P reader, Type J reader. In fact, there's spin-off detailed videos explaining these concepts in my Vocabulary of Comics playlist if you're interested in that. It also explains why I started this reading guide in 1991, and of course, and not relevant for this video, but definitely relevant for the next video. It talks about stuff like the Superman Triangle era and why it is that it's quite difficult to work out what order or sequence to read Superman issues in and the way they kind of interweave in and out of one another as a series. Well, with that said, with no further ado, let's have a look here, and we have the 12th era of our Superman reading. Now, last time, like I said, we covered the Infinite Crisis mega event in a dedicated video, and before that, we covered the 11th era of Superman, which is from March 2004 to April 2006, which was the issue leading directly up until the Infinite Crisis event. Well, today we're continuing, so we're continuing on May 2006 over to 2008. So if you consider the bookends to this event, on one side we've got Infinite Crisis, and we're going to read up to the New Krypton arc. Now that's not an event, but it's a really important arc that the entirety of the next video, which is called the 13th era, is going to be dedicated to. What that means is that today we are just going to be looking at 69 issues. That doesn't sound like too much, but trust me, it does get complicated and is well worth having a clear reading guide like this for it. As always, we're going to go row by row. So each time we go on a particular row, we then go to the next row and the next row and just follow it in that sequence. It can look confusing if you don't try to follow it in that order, but literally just go down one line at a time. As you just saw, depending on what I'm highlighting, you'll see that there's hint text on quite a lot of the different boxes here. And that's always really useful to provide a bit of added context, and it kind of fleshes out the stuff I'm talking about. So let's dive into it. We've got the 12th era of Superman, which starts with an arc called Up, Up and Away. As it says here, this arc is part of the 1 year later event. If you're not sure what 1 year later is, obviously you can Google it. And the end of my Infinite Crisis mega event walkthrough video talks about it as well. Now, this was written by Kurt Busiek and Jeff Johns. It's important to note here that we've got the Superman logo, and this is another Superman series. But what actually happened was the Adventures of Superman series had ended with issue 649 of Adventures of Superman, and then Superman is what then picked up the numbering from that point on. If I go back a moment, I rarely do this, but I'm just going to tab back over to the 11th era. And if we see here, Superman was issue 226, and that's the last issue of Superman with this numbering, and then it jumps straight from 226. If you go back to the 12th era, it goes over to 650, picking up from the Adventures of Superman 649, which again on the 11th era tab we see here. Okay, it's worth just noting that because it's very easy to get confused in this. As I said, this is all 1 year later, so there are a variety of things here which involve a chronological 12-month jump forward for Superman. All in continuity. This isn't confusing stuff like the For Tomorrow arc, but it's just worth being aware of that and being aware of what's going on. In terms of what to read and the order to read them in, what you need are Superman issues 650 to 653 and Action Comics 837 to 840, but then you need to interlace them in the way you can see here. So Superman, Action Comics, and so on. And that is the 8-issue arc there. What happens then is you have a couple of what I've been referring to as decoupled arcs. And the way that I would read them, what this means is that, sorry, when I say decoupled arcs, that means that Action Comics and Superman are proceeding relatively independently. However, what I would stress is that there's a particular order in which I recommend reading these decoupled arcs. Because that basically is the rest of the issues we're going to be talking about today. They don't interweave as tightly as up, and away does. So, in that sense, I would recommend, and this is purely my recommendation, having read every single page of every single issue we're talking about, I'd recommend reading it in this order. So, to start off with, we have Action Comics 841 to 843. This is an arc called Back in Action, and again, if you float over it, I've got the text there saying Back in Action. Let me know if you think I should reformat it so I actually have the titles on the left-hand side. I've kind of ummed and ahed on that a little bit myself, and I'm open to suggestions. As I mentioned, I've spent quite a while away just lurking hermit-like in a cave, working out the best software and format to do these guides in the future. And what I've come up with is this, which is a live editable format. So do let me know if you have suggestions. So anyway, as I say, this arc here, which is called Back in Action, it's a three-parter. It introduces both the character of the auctioneer, who's slightly annoying, and also the concept of a third Kryptonian living on Earth. We'll come back to that relatively soon. Next, we have a really good, really interesting arc called The Last Sun. It's a six-parter, and it's a 2008 Superman storyline written by Jeff Johns and Richard Donner. Yes, Richard Donner, the movie director of the original Superman movies. Now, the sequence to read this in is issue 844, 845, and then 846. 846, if you read it as a single issue, will end saying to be continued in annual 10. Do not worry about that. Ignore that. It has got some linked stories, but we're going to come back to annual 10 later. After 846, there's actually an issue called 8, well, it is 847, but it's called Intermezzo. Now, Intermezzo is actually written by Dwayne McDuffie, but clearly fits in here and is an interlude in the Last Sun storyline. It's often ignored in collected editions, but I would recommend checking it out. After 847, the next part of this story is 851. Yes, we'll talk about those missing issues in a moment. And then after 851, that ends saying to be continued in Action Comics Annual 11, which is here. Now, that's the end. That's the climax of this storyline. It's noteworthy that Action Comics Annual 11 does say that the next Action Comics issue is 865, which actually is all the way down here, crazy enough, which I guess gives an idea as to why we're having these gaps and things are jumping around, and we've got people like Dwayne McDuffie rushing in there. The reason for that is that the chronological release order of these issues was delayed by a variety of real world factors, and the publishing schedule essentially went out of whack. That meant that the reading order is nothing to do with the publishing order whatsoever. In terms of reading order, please stick with what I'm saying. Um, another thing I guess to note here is that The Last Sun introduces a character called Chris. I'm not going to go into more details here, but it introduces a character called Chris, who is actually later shown in the Superman issues from 662 all the way to 675. Now, it's important to read the Last Sun arc up here first before reading the Superman arc. However, there's no way to really read them kind of simultaneously, because for Superman 662, that's essentially from this point onwards is kind of a continuous arc that goes from cliffhanger to cliffhanger and cliffhanger. It's impossible and unpleasant to read the stories in a chronological order of release in a way that shows this character Chris and his involvement in the Superman stories in a coherent way. Therefore, as a result, I am going to strongly recommend you just read the Last Sun arc to start with, and you just keep in mind that there is a real world publishing problem happening at the moment, and to just be a relaxed type J reader about it. keeping in mind that all those issues, 662 to 675, as I said, they all take place before Action Comics Annual 11, which is the climax of Last Sun. It's slightly wild to me that 13 issues essentially happen in the other series, in the Superman series, between issue 851 and Action Comics 11 finally coming out. I mean, that just seems wild to me. And again, it's another reason not to be slavish to the idea of chronology or to some kind of big picture. Often these things aren't the case. These are real world comics published in the real world by real people, and publishing issues do happen. So that's the Last Sun. We're going to talk more about that at the end of the video because I have a little thing I want to show you. I'm going to do a little giveaway. But let's move on to the next arc. This is an arc called Redemption. It's a standalone Superman two-parter written by Fabian Nicieza. And yeah, it's issues 848 and 849. The next issue to read after that, and like I say, I would read Last Sun all the way through, and then I would go back and read 848, 849, and I would also read 850. 850 is set in the 30th century. It's got Supergirl, the Legion of Superheroes. It actually fits in with an arc in the Supergirl series called Beyond Good and Evil, which is her ongoing series at the time is Supergirl Volume 5, and I believe Beyond Good and Evil is issues 23 to 27. This whole story is a reminiscence about Clark Kent, basically, and could largely go anywhere. I mean, you might as well read it here because 850 goes after 849. But honestly, it's good, but it's not really necessary, per se. What happens next is for this block, as you can see in the black outline, is a story that I'm calling 321 Action. That's what it's explicitly titled. There's quite a lot of notes on this, but I'll just talk you through it. It starts off with Action Comics 852, and that issue is considered to be parallel to Countdown 42, but only by virtue of one shared page. Now, in this issue, Jimmy mentions Chris, the character of Chris we talked about before, so he's still here, and this obviously conflicts with the ending of Last Sun, but that's because issue 852 here comes out before Action Comics Annual 11 there. Like I say, you need to be quite flexible about this. Anyway, you have Action Comics 852, and that is in many ways meant to be considered parallel to Countdown. We're going to talk about some Countdown issues here. Countdown is a separate ongoing series. It's not Superman related or Superman focused, and it's a spin-off from Infinite Crisis as we're heading into the final Crisis mega event. However, if you want to be a completionist, then after Action Comics 852, you would read Countdown 41, which only has 2 relevant pages. Countdown 40, which only has 2 relevant pages. Countdown 39, which only has 2 relevant pages. And Countdown 38, which has 3 relevant pages. But to be honest, there's no need to read those. You can just move straight on to Action Comics 853. This annoyingly says it's set after the events of Countdown 39, but that's not accurate because Jimmy is not shown taking down the exomorphic man there or anywhere really. You will need to read the issue to know what I mean, but trust me. Action Comics 853 ends by saying to be continued in Countdown 37, which we do see here. Now, Countdown 37 only has 2 relevant pages, but I will point out those 2 relevant pages lead directly into Action Comics 854. So Action 854 is set directly after the cliffhanger events in Countdown 37. Note that this issue also has the first return of Crypto, character that I love, of course, since Infinite Crisis, which means that this must be before Superman 668, which we'll get to later. Okay, a lot to unpack there, but let's move on. The next arc we have is an arc called Escape from Bizarro World. Weirdly enough, in a lot of Last Sun collected editions, they include this 4-issue arc, which is annoying and stupid. I think that's mainly because Action Comics Annual 10 is part of the Escape from Bizarro World arc. And so, because I've got some Last Sun tie-ins, it all gets collected together. Anyway, there we are. This is issue 855, 856, 857, and Action Comics Annual 10. After that, we have another Action Comics arc. Now, this one is Superman and the Legion of Superheroes, the 6-part arc from 858 all the way through to 863, as you can see there. You may be aware, or you may have gathered from my other videos, I don't like Legion of Superheroes, but this story is okay. Then we have another arc. Now, this arc is one that I like to call the Legion of Three Worlds arc for obvious reasons. It starts off with Action Comics 864, and then it leads into a Final Crisis spin-off miniseries called Legion of Three Worlds, issue 1 to 5, which you can see here. Now, whilst these are branded Final Crisis, the truth is that this 5-issue mini works completely fine alone. It continues on from the ending of Infinite Crisis and is self-contained. I read no other event comics at the time I was reading this, and I still understood it fine. Legion of Three Worlds, by the way, is a Legion of Superheroes storyline written by Jeff Johns with illustration by George Perez. It was published as a crossover to Final Crisis, and the story is a team up between the original Legion, the Reboot Legion, and something called the Three-Boot Legion, explaining their respective continuities. I find it a bit annoying. But it does lead on directly from the story we were just looking at, which is this Legion of Superheroes and Superman six-parter. So you kind of it's like a sequel arc. So you kind of fine to carry on reading that. And then the very final Action Comics issue we're looking at here is Action Comics 865, which is a good issue, but an interesting thing it does, which is I think quite polarizing for fans, is that it retcons a very key event with respect to Toyman and Cat Grant, or rather Cat Grant's son. So retconning that event, I don't know. I don't know if it was necessary, and I find that sort of stuff slightly annoying. Okay, let's just take a moment and breathe and scroll up. These are all the Action Comic issues. Not many issues, but a lot to talk about. Similarly, for the Superman issues, these again are decoupled arcs, but remember, these kind of happen simultaneous to the broken publishing for the Last Sun event, so please don't be worried if you see the character Chris in these issues. There's no perfect way to read these. Well, the first issue, 654 all the way through to 658, is something called Camelot Fords. It's a 5-issue story. There's then a 3-issue break I like to call the Camelot Falls interlude. This is set after the Auctioneer arc. Remember, we talked about the Auctioneer arc all the way up here at the beginning here. Um, this includes Superman 659. Superman 659 is interesting. This issue was originally intended for a December 13th, 2006 release, and it featured a story about crypto. It was later announced by Kurt Busiek and confirmed by DC that the original story would be shelved for a later release. The plot of the next planned issue would be published in number 659, as we see here, which saw release a couple of months late in February, and with co-plotting by Fabian Nicieza and the majority of the art by Peter Vale. The crypto story that was meant to be in this ended up seeing publication 4 years later in Superman 712, so that was annoying. Anyway, this three-parter kind of interlude bit is Superman 660 and 661 as well. And then that takes us to, I'll just hover over it, Camelot Falls Part 2. Again, as you see here, this arc has Chris from Last Sun living with Lois and Clark. This is a straightforward set of numbers, 662, 663, 664, and then unfortunately 667. We have to skip a few in order for this to make sense, but we'll come back to those in a moment. And then 667 ends by saying it continues in Superman 668, but it does not. It continues in Superman Annual 13. You can see why a reading guide like this one is so important. The next story arc is a two-parter, issue 665 and 666. These are both standalone issues. 665 is just all about Jimmy Olsen, and 666 is predictably an evil magic demon theme. Superman 666, of course. The next arc is one that I think we'd like to call the Third Kryptonian. It starts off with issue 668. So Crypto is seen in this series for the first time since Infinite Crisis. Remember, we saw him in 321 Action earlier in the Action comic issues. We then have issues 669 and 670. In Superman 670, we see the destruction of Kandor 2 here. This is not the Kandor from Krypton that we're about to encounter in the 13th era of Superman reading. And the origin of the city that gets destroyed here is never fully clarified, so I always find it really disappointing. The next arc is a 3-issue arc called The Insect Queen, 671, 672, 673. The next arc is a 2-issue arc called Shadows Linger, Part 1 and Part 2. Superman 675 has a final page that ends with gigantic cosmic hands swirling over a black hole in space. That never, ever, ever gets explained. And frankly, it drives me slightly insane when I think about it. I did a lot of research and a lot of reading for this guide, and this is the one mystery I never got to the bottom of. If anyone out there in YouTube land knows, please just pop it in the comments and let me know, because I would love to know what I've missed here. Then we have a single connective issue, Superman 676, just there. And then we have the final arc here, and this one I like to call the Coming of Atlas, as you can see. And the Coming of Atlas is a story arc that includes issues 677, 678, 679, and 680. 680 is a last issue that ends saying to be continued in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen #1, and that is the issue you need next. Ooh, maybe I should put that over here with miscellaneous. Yes, I probably should. The events of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen take place after Superman 680, but before the Superman New Krypton special, which is the issue that we're going to start with in the 13th era. Yeah, I'll tweak this after I've recorded the video, so you will see this over here if you were to download the guide. Yeah, also in the Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen one shot, is also the news of the death of the original Newsboy Legion, who frankly we haven't seen in years. So it's a bit of a weird time to just mention that they're no longer a thing in the Superman universe. But this is the issue that does that. Hopefully that helps. Hopefully that was clear. Lots of little weird things, and having these kind of disjointed issues, especially disjointed issues that are decoupled arcs but with overlapping characters and publishing problems caused by Last Sun and intersecting Final Crisis things, it is difficult, it is confusing. Please just follow my guide along, especially when you have things like, as you can see here, a couple of random issues, 665 and 666, that shouldn't be within this story arc here for Camelot Falls and so on. So, please do follow the guide. Any questions, do let me know. Yeah. Next time we'll be looking at the 13th era, which is the reintroduction of the triangles from the Superman Triangle era. So, yeah, look forward to speaking to you all next time.
Okay, a quick break into the real world, and specifically I just want to talk about what we've just been talking about, which is Superman The Last Sun. Here it is in a deluxe edition, really nice glossy cover. This is the sort of iconic image from this arc, and it's just the Last Sun story arc, collected in the exact right reading order. Let's have a look under the dust jacket, looking great. And it's the exact right reading order we've just been talking about. It's all collected in here. It's a great story. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommended. And here it is in a deluxe hardcover format. So why am I talking about this in the middle of my reading guide? The reason being, whilst it's available in a deluxe hardcover format, I actually originally bought it in a normal hardcover size format. Now, I will show you this. It's a standard size, but it is a hardcover. It's a matte cover, which honestly I actually prefer. I prefer the design of this to the design of that. I prefer having the writing on the side, so you can see the S logo. I just prefer the look of this substantially. However, it's not oversized, and therefore, after a lot of toing and froing, after a lot of sort of debating with myself, I've decided I am going to get rid of the standard size hardcover in my collection because it's the exact same set of issues as in that one. In fact, this is exclusively the Last Sun story arc. Oh, it also has 3D goggles for the 3D issue in the Phantom Zone. As you can see, it's been untouched, it's been unused. And this is the Last Sun story arc and just the Last Sun story arc. This one, the deluxe hardcover, is the Last Sun, but also for some reason includes the Bizarro miniseries. The Bizarro couple of issues that are in this. So I'm going to keep in this because it's a deluxe. And then here we have this. So I'm giving this away. I do giveaways on my channel occasionally. If you want it, comment in the comments down below. I will send it out to you. Probably just UK post, because otherwise it'd be a bit expensive to send overseas. But yeah, no, if you comment down below, let me know. It doesn't go out to previous winners that have won previous giveaways. But if you would like this for free, just for supporting the channel, please just say.
And there we have it. In case you're interested in knowing where these resources are, so the guides, the maps, and so on, they're all available on my website. They're all available for free. You can go into the website, which is nogodsorkings.com, and download the Google Sheet for the Superman reading order, or you can go on the website and look at these reading maps for all the various DC events and a whole bunch of other things I've got on there to your heart's desire. If, however, you are interested in a written version of this guide, then it is available on Amazon. I've recently just self-published it. It is the cheapest possible tier you can get on Amazon. So it's 79 pence UK, 99 cents American, and so on. It's free if you're on Kindle Unlimited, and there is a free sample on the website as well. The reason I put this onto Amazon is kind of a proof of concept. I'm interested to see if people are interested in the written guides, whether or not people want to pick them up. And also, it's a good way for me to bat off all the people that are going to be in the comments asking for a Batman guide. If you want a Batman guide, I don't really particularly have any interest in doing one, but I will do one if this book gets 500 reviews. So if this book gets 500 5-star reviews, then I will start doing a Batman reading guide at some point. I don't think that's going to happen, but there we are. Of course, feel free to support the channel by picking this up. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe. But as always, the best way to support the channel is by picking up one of my other books, which isn't a non-fiction reading guide. It's actually a fictional, completely original superhero story. It's prose, so not a comic or words, but it's about superheroes in just a really interesting kind of post-apocalyptic dystopic idea. The first 4 books of the series are out, and if you want to support, please pick that up. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay classy.